Hey, good morning, mediums. It is season 2, episode 45. Welcome to another episode of Live here on Keystroke Medium. I am Josh Ten Finger Hayes here with my co-host Scott Moon. And today, the author of the Cordova Vector and Paragons trilogy, C Steven the Man Chuck Manley joins the show. Chuck has been writing and publishing for 20 years and took it up a notch in 2014 when he started self-publishing. And today he joins us to talk about his writing journey. Chuck, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks for coming back after TNL. You know, usually we have to bribe people and
sometimes
sacrifice a goat.
Got to be coercion, and blackmail and things, get people back on the show a second time from time to time. But having said that, I really think we should have came into the show laughing because we had some good stuff right there before the show. I think we should make that a part of our intro. Just blowing snot bubbles,
If you guys need to do like a blooper reel.
We should.
Behind the scenes kind of thing.
I really wish that there was a way to record the pre-show and post-show without having it be live. Because like today, like literally 15 minutes before we started the show, I'm moving my computer, getting dressed, and reading the intro for practice as we're getting ready to hit the broadcast button. And I think people would like watching me get dressed.
It's good. And so what I did is I tweaked the intro a little bit to give you some surprises. So you're just kind of reading it live, not really knowing what you're going to get.
He said, C Steven the Man Chuck Manley. I was like, what? Very nicely done.
And you have to have watched our last episode to understand 10 Finger Hayes. So everybody go back and watch that after the show.
A throwback.
I'm still lobbying for Boom Boom. I like that one.
Right.
Boom Boom and
we
Bomber.
did talk about that, talking about nicknames, and a lot of Josh's names we can't use on the show because we want them to be able to fly on airplanes and stuff.
That's right. I get on the watch list, and then it's all because of Keystroke Medium. You can't.
No,
fly
honestly, I'm on the bomb unit. Yeah,
sure. That's what they all say. Well, Chuck, it's been a couple months since you've been on the show.
Yes.
We had you back on TNL back in April, I think. It was a while ago.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
April 20th. April 20th, you were on the show, and we were talking about focusing on the finishing your novel back then. And I think right after that show, we scheduled you to come on this show for our author interview.
That is true.
It's a pleasure to have you back on. For those of you, our audience that didn't watch that show or would like to know more about you, would you share just a little bit about yourself and how you got started in writing?
Sure. I am Chuck Manley. I write under C Steven Manley. I've been writing since I was about 8 years old. I tell this story on the first episode of my podcast, which is entitled, what did I call it?
Story Shots.
Well, the Story Shots podcast, but the episode is titled "Who Is This Guy and Why Should I Listen to Him?"
Ah, yes.
And I started writing when I was 8. It was a Halloween story for my, third grade class, I guess. And the teachers liked it so much they ended up stapling it up on the bulletin board outside the lunchroom for the Halloween season. And after that, I just got the bug, and I did the whole write and query and rejection, treadmill for most of the late 80s and 90s. I got fed up with that and kind of shifted directions to something more personal with my writing for a while. And then in 2014, discovered KDP, and I'm about to, my latest book, the 5th one that I will put up, is with beta readers right now, and hopefully will be on the shelf before the end of the month. And I've also got a short story collection that I'm wrapping up that I'm hoping I'll have on the shelf sometime in July.
That is awesome. Your first trilogy, you said you mentioned that you published it in 2014. When did you finish it?
Let's see. I started writing that in late 2014. I think I put it in Amazon, the first book in Amazon, like February maybe of 2015.
Mm-hmm.
And then I finished the trilogy, I think it was actually February or March of 2016.
April.
Oh, okay. Well, then April of 2016.
I only say that because I'm looking at it right now. I'm cheating.
Okay, yeah. Well, then I finished it in April of 2016, And I took a little bit of a break there before I started the Brace Cordova space opera thing. And yeah, that's kind of how it worked out.
And your first trilogy is the Paragons trilogy. It's Awakened, Conduit, and then Unveiled.
Correct.
Do you want to talk a little bit about that series and what it's
Sure.
about?
I think I described this last time as a science fiction thriller cupcake with superhuman icing and horror sprinkles. It's
We did talk about that cupcake, and now we got in the mood for cupcakes.
That's right. Well, welcome back. Basically, it's about a world. It's like modern day world, and but there's a hidden world beneath it. That's pretty much a trope. But in this particular hidden world, way back when people still lived in caves and trees and that sort of thing, an extra dimensional race visited Earth and started playing around with the human DNA. And from that manipulation, people with extra normal abilities developed. And these people, over the centuries, they ended up being characters from mythology like Hercules and Artemis and all the myths. Some of them were real, some weren't. And in the modern era, it's basically they're called if that part of the DNA that was manipulated got relegated to the junk DNA in modern man, and through a certain set of circumstances, that can be activated. And when that DNA gets activated, you essentially become a mutant. And there are levels of these mutants. There's what they call hell, I can't remember now. But there's basically the lowest level is you might have a weird skin discoloration or something like that. And then the middle level, you might have one little trick you can do. And then at the highest level, they have what they call paragons. And paragons these are your X-Men. These are your super powered individuals. And the book is about two strangers who wake up in a modern day dungeon. They have no idea about all of this stuff going on in the world they live in. And they end up being two paragons. And the trilogy is about them kind of dealing with that and fighting off the secret societies and all the different things that try to keep the hidden world hidden, and the conspiracies and all the different things that sort of keep that part of the world secret is called the Veil. And and I call the whole setting the Veiled World. So, yeah.
It's got like blockbuster movie pitch written all over it.
Yes. I'm actually hoping for Netflix, series or some kind of HBO 20 episode kind of deal. So
that would work. Also, the last show we talked about that, and you mentioned a little bit today, like the historical examples of paragons.
Right.
There's a few others that were pretty cool. Did you mention, like, I thought you said?
Yeah. One of there's one particular flavor of the powers that come along that explains the whole undead thing. Mm-hmm. And Vlad the Impaler, right. What, 600-700 years ago, whatever it was, he was actually a paragon of what they call a necrophage. So he was one of he's like the most infamous one, because he basically took his powers, and that's, all the legends of him being a vampire and stuff sort of grew out of that.
Yeah.
And there's a bunch of different other ones.
What genre would you peg this series as?
See, that's the tricky part, because I like to call it a superhuman thriller. Mm-hmm. But the only place I can put it really in Amazon is under the superhero category and the contemporary fantasy categories. But there's a very distinct difference between a superhuman book and a superhero book.
So let's talk about that a bit.
Okay. Well, the big gulf between them. So a superhero book, superheroes is a very distinct genre. You've got the colorful costumes, the secret identities, the over-the-top villains, the big superpowers, the world-shaking consequences to their actions, and that sort of thing. And stuff like that, there's a reason they call it for color, because it's very visual. And I think that stories like that are more suited to more visual mediums like comics, movies, television, that sort of thing. At the other end of that, though, you've got what I like to call the superhuman books. Now, these are books about people with powers, but they're not necessarily all the big powers, you know, and superhuman books are really everywhere. If you take a space marine and you put him in a really fancy suit of battle armor, well, you've got Iron Man on a budget. Okay.
Yeah.
Harry Dresden, he throws around fireballs and force this and, you know, whatever that. Well, those are superpowers.
Yeah.
You know, if you look at any fantasy fiction that involves vampires, werewolves, any of that stuff, it's chock full of superpowers. They just don't call them superpowers. They call them magic. So books about people with powers are what I like to call superhuman books. And then you've got the other end of the spectrum, which is the superhero books. And the big difference between the two is what I like to call the and factor. Let's look at a character like Daredevil. All right. Okay. Daredevil has one power. He got some shit splashed in his eyes and suddenly all his other senses are over the top and he's blind. But everything else about him, his ability to fight, everything else was just hard work and busting his butt at the gym. Okay. But he has that right. One power. Now, let's look at like Superman. Superman also has super senses, and he can fly, and he's invulnerable, and he's got super strength, and he's got this, and he's got that. The more ands you stack on that character, the more superhero it becomes, and also, I think, the more unrelatable the character becomes.
Yeah.
But when it comes down to novels, I think that the superhuman is much more effective in prose form than the superhero. The superhero is better on the big screen or on TV or whatever. So the Paragons trilogy is very much a superhuman book, what I like to call a superhuman thriller, as opposed to a superhero book, but it's in the superhero category. And that was a really long way to answer your question about what genre.
But it was very clear. I'm not sure if I've heard that lined out quite like that before. I like that a lot. I like the idea of superhuman because you don't necessarily have to be fighting the archvillain or something. If you're superhuman, exactly. You could be superhuman in overcoming, you know, whatever your daily life. You could have like literary superhuman, you know, overcoming a more literary topic, you know,
right.
Like a family.
I've always kind of looked at it too, as if a guy with a 45 can pop one in your noggin and drop you, you're not really a superhero. You might have some powers, but right. You know, that's your edge. And superheroes, they are above the concerns of simple bank robbers and things like that, you know.
Well, and they do so much damage, and a lot of shows have kind of played upon that, but to have we watched my wife and I went and saw Wonder Woman last night, which is awesome.
I saw it yesterday.
Yeah, good stuff. But it's just like a lot of those is how, because they always have like your superhero, but then they have kind of like a non-superhero person that's with them.
Oh, sure.
You know, or their crew, and or like all the humans in the Transformers movies. How do they even keep up? Why are they even there? I mean, you got robots.
Depends on who's writing it.
Right.
You know? And
so that's the thing, is how do you get parity between your protagonist and your antagonist without destroying every city that's standing on the planet of the Earth, like in the last Superman movie, where they just basically wrecked everything.
Well, yeah, where they basically leveled most of Metropolis. Yeah, I know what you mean.
So, but I find that interesting. I like the idea of superhuman. I think it's an excellent distinction. Now, if you can just convince Amazon to make a
I actually wrote to them and asked them to put a superhuman category under the thriller heading. And, you know, I just don't sell enough books for them to listen to me. So
we'll get there.
Yeah.
So we got a couple of questions, Josh. You want to dig those out of the live chat, or did you have something else you wanted to get to?
One of the ones that features on this trilogy specifically is Vicky Malone Kennedy asks, what's the target age for this series? Talked about genre.
It is the Paragons trilogy has some in the first book particularly, there is some darker stuff. I wouldn't let my son read it. He's 12.
Mm-hmm.
So it's definitely, I would say 16 and above, and mostly because of one particular scene. One of the main characters, there's two primary protagonists. One of them is a young woman who's been abused pretty bad her whole life. You know, she came up real rough. She's got a brother that was really mean to her. And at one point during the book, she sort of confronts him, and that gets kind of ugly. But I left it in because she's very rough through the first portion of the book. And the way she confronts her brother sort of makes everybody go, oh, I get it now. I understand why she drops the F-bomb every other word and why she, is so untrusting and that sort of stuff. So, but then that also continues with her character development through the rest of the arc.
Right.
Did you have any, I say negative feedback, but did you have any feedback on that specifically, like the language in the book? I know like a lot.
Actually, I haven't. There a couple of the reviews did mention how she was very foul mouthed, but again, they said, but once they got further into the book, they sort of understood why. And by the end of the trilogy, she's a very different person. Both the main characters go through a very big change in their outlooks and attitudes because of the changes they go through the course of the story.
Well, that's good, because I've seen a lot of kind of silly negative feedback. I know a lot of people don't like language, but there are a lot of great books out there that are filled with.
It can go either way if the story is good,
right? Well, it depends on how realistic you want it to be, because let's face it, that talk like that,
Yeah, I curse like a sailor.
I do all the time. I don't even hear it.
Yeah,
my wife gets on to me all the time because I don't even hear it come out of my mouth. I've been doing it my whole life, and I'll be 50 this year. So that's a lot of programming to overcome.
Well, and the fact that this show is as clean as it is frankly just.
I'm surprised. I was just noting the difference between when you guys went live and before we went live. All three of us were like, "No, they need to work."
That's probably why it's a good thing that the pre-ed show is not broadcast.
You have to put the little E on that.
Yeah. So good stuff, right? It's like punctuation and stuff. But I'm very comfortable with profanity in my daily life and in my writing from time to time. I had a narrator that didn't want to read certain words, and I went back and edited all the F words. Anything was okay except for the F word or explicit sex scenes. And I went back and I changed some of the words, and in a lot of cases I took it out, and you can structure the dialogue sometimes to be just as forceful or very close to it.
Yes.
But sometimes there's just no replacing it because it's what that character would say. You got a Space Marine that's been, going into battle for 20 years. They're probably they might swear. They're going to eventually stub their toe, and the F-bomb is coming out.
Well, I when I finished the Paragons trilogy, my wife, she requested I write something my son could read, and the Brace Cordova. I pulled a Battlestar Galactica with that. I took the F-bomb and I changed it into another word. They had frack. Yeah. And I went and I changed it to vac, like vacuum. Because what's the worst thing that could happen to somebody who travels through space? Then that would be getting sucked unprotected into the vacuum.
Right.
So they say vac as a way of expressing that. And then they'll drop the occasional damn or crap or whatever, but other than that, it doesn't get any worse than that.
Right, and that makes sense to me a lot more. I don't like when people I don't like fictional swear words when they're just kind of randomish,
or they're shoehorned in, and you can just tell it was forced.
And they're used as.
I agree.
The only time I have really noticed the change in a cuss for a story world, and I've liked it, is in the Stormlight Archives, where every time they curse, it's like Stormfather or storming or whatever, and it makes sense because the storms are the worst thing that can happen in the world.
Yeah, and that makes perfect sense for that setting,
right?
If you tailor it to your setting, I think, and it's a natural part of the language for those characters in that place. Yeah, and man, that's absolutely cool.
In all of my books going forward, all my profanity is going to go something like, by the rage of Josh Hayes, the 10-fingered father. I
remember when I was in. I think I was when I was in college. I was writing epic fantasy at the time, and I just took the Norse mythology.
Oh, there you go.
And then I used that for like a certain race of dwarves and Viking type guys, but their curses were all like Thor's balls and Odin's teeth and stuff like that. But never a modern profanity was spoken. But buddy, they could curse up a storm in their own way.
Oh yeah.
I tell you the one.
Josh's 10 fingers.
Yeah,
that's right. The 10 fingers, and then what's really bad, it's 9 fingers.
As you get closer to the end of the book, it gets a little bit more.
Yeah, the one book that I really couldn't stand it in was A Night Without Stars, the latest Peter Hamilton book, because he changed basically he changed the F word to crudding, CRUDDING.
See, that's the kind. Yeah,
and it it was so glaring that every time I read it, I cringed, and I was like, "Oh my god!"
Remember, maybe I'm not a connoisseur of swear words.
It could be maybe in Britain that's a big curse word. I don't know, but it was very jarring to read that, because you knew what he was trying to say, and you're like, "Why don't you just say it?" Because he says it. And I get it, because it was a different planet, so that he came up with a different curse word. But in all the rest of his books, he uses the F word all the time.
And he's not shy about writing, because there's a lot of explicit stuff in Peter F. Hamilton's books. One of the things that makes them so interesting is they will go there.
Yeah,
some of those.
So let's talk about your Vacking Space Opera series.
Vacking Space Opera.
Vacking Space Opera. Vacking Cordova guy.
It's the Cordova Vector. The Brace Cordova is the first book in the Brace Cordova, and then you have you're writing the second book now.
I have finished the second book. It is with my beta readers at the moment. That's the one I'm hoping will be out within the next week or two. It's just book 2 of that. It just the continuing adventures of Brace Cordova and the crew of the Mithril Phoenix. It's called the Cordova Incursion.
Let's talk about the crew and the characters for a while. And the ship. What you said it was kind of a Battlestar. Well, you took the cursing from kind of Battlestar Galactica, but let's talk about the story. What's it about?
Well, as with any space opera, you want to start with the setting, and my setting is what I call the Commonwealth of Races. And it's essentially a Star Trek type setting without teleporters and the energy matter transference kind of stuff that they do so well in Star Trek. So you've got a setting where it's basically about a quarter of the Milky Way, and there's a whole bunch of different races, and they've formed this big galactic type government. There's still some outlying races that aren't attached to it, but they can sign on as signatory races and that sort of thing. And the story takes place on what they call the Edge. And the Edge is kind of it's far away from the center of the Commonwealth civilization. And it's kind of where they let the people who don't really want to follow the rules just sort of hang out.
People that use the word fracking or
vacking. The people that say vacking a lot.
Those vacking edge.
And don't like to pay taxes and stuff like that.
Vacking taxes.
And then law enforcement just kind of shows up once in a while to let everybody know, yes, we're still watching.
Vacking
cops.
We're the vacking police.
Vacking cops. But it's centered around a guy named Brace Cordova, and he's a former military pilot. And he did a good deed that was technically illegal, and they decided to make an example of him. So he spends 5 years in what they call Minot Station. And Josh, you might recognize Minot.
Yes.
But
the butthole of North Dakota.
That is correct. But it's called Minot Station.
Fans. Thanks, Josh.
It's a frozen little split pea of a planet out on the edge, and he gets to spend 5 years there in prison. And when he gets out, he gets swept up with these smugglers. And they've got an engineer who's half insane. They've got a ship's doctor who's a drunk. They've got the first mate and like the third in command. They're both like these. The first mate's a guy named Vors, and he's a 7 foot tall, what they call a leonine. And he's basically a big cat guy, but genetically is more similar to an ape than a feline. So he doesn't go around like, grooming himself and shit like that. He's in no way. I hate it when people take like a cat and say, this is an alien, and then they make it act exactly like a cat on Earth would act. That just doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Because a cat would groom himself, and an ape would groom whoever he felt.
Whoever he was with. So Vors is like this big swashbuckling guy who like charges into battle laughing like a lunatic, and he loves a good brawl, but he's also very philosophical in the quiet moments. He's your classic pirate kind of wise old pirate guy. And then his partner is a chick named is a character named Ash, and Ash comes from a race called the Calite, and the Calite they appear as pretty much kind of androgynous human females with, like, instead of eyebrows, they have bone ridges, and they have really thick black nails on all their digits, and bright red skin and dark black or solid white hair. But they are functional hermaphrodites, so they can like procreate pretty much with anybody they want. And so she's just a straight up killer. I mean, she's, you know, not like a, "Ooh, I'm crazy and I love killing people" kind of thing, but hey, you pay me, I will make your problem go away kind of attitude.
Kind of like the John Wick of space.
Exactly. That's a good way to put it.
The new movie out, The Atomic Blonde. We saw the previews for that last night.
Yeah, I saw that too. But anyway, they get swept up in the search for a lost starship from thousands and thousands of years earlier, and go looking for it. And the problem is, they actually stole some stuff from the Commonwealth to forward their mission. And so a ship from the Commonwealth military is trying to chase them down. And there's some bad guys that Brace pissed off looking for him for something he didn't mean to do, but technically did do. And then this all sort of converges in unknown space, and shenanigans ensue. And there's a second storyline with Brace's cousin Latessa, who is also she's still in the military. So there's like, I've got the two storylines kind of running concurrently.
We always like cousin Latessa.
Is this and this is a space opera trilogy? So
well, see, here's I actually I'm gonna have to work on those two covers because it says the Brace Cordova trilogy, but as I was writing Incursion, I realized the trilogy ain't gonna cut it. So it's actually gonna end up being 5 books.
Oh, okay.
So I'm looking at a pentology at this point, or
I like that.
Pentology. Yeah.
Quintet, pentology, whatever you want to call it.
Quintology.
Yeah, something like that.
A 5ology.
There you go.
A 5-book series.
So
I got you all off there. Sorry, I got you.
Do you have plans to do spinoffs from that? See, I mean, it sounds like a huge universe that you could do pretty much anything in.
That was kind of the plan. What I'd like to do is kind of like Terry Brooks and Raymond Feist and guys like that do, is have this big setting and then write trilogies within that setting, maybe with different characters and stuff. Yeah. And after I finished Incursion and started working on Walking Worlds, the short story collection that I'm working on, I decided there's a character I introduced in book 2, and I kind of wanted to explain how he got to where he was in the book. So I'm actually in the process of writing a short story about him now. So technically I have already sort of spun off from it. But cool. He's like this real quiet space marine type guy. I'm kind of modeling him off of Jethro Gibbs from NCIS. He's kind of he just sort of stares when he's got something to say. You know, he doesn't say a whole lot.
Slaps people over the back of the head.
Yes, occasionally. Probably with the butt of his rifle.
Lauren Moore asks, she asked this a little bit ago, was your manuscript featured on the writership at one time? She recognized the characters and the setting, so she was wondering.
Yes, actually, the first chapter from Awakened, the Paragons trilogy, Leslie and I think it was Alyssa at the time, did that one, and then Leslie and Clark did the first chapter of Cordova Vector. So yeah.
And the writership podcast is Leslie, I can't remember. It's Clark Chamberlain and
Leslie Watts.
Leslie Watts,
right?
Yeah. They take the beginnings of books or several chapters, and they read them, and then they kind of break them down through their podcast. And
exactly, yeah. They break it down, and there's some good stuff there. I'm in a group with Leslie, and I've listened to a lot of her podcasts, and there's some really good tips to be had if you listen to those guys and what they've got to say.
We've had Clark on the show twice. Always learn a crap ton from him when he's on there. He just posted on his Facebook, I think last night, that he finished his writing a novel, Harry Potter comparison.
Oh, where he breaks down Harry Potter. Yeah, I heard him talking about that. Yeah.
So I have to go. I know that I subscribed at one time to see it, but I must have lost the email somewhere because I was interested in. That's one of my favorite series. Is
an epic box of writing tips and nuggets. Clark is really has a good way of putting things. I guess he makes it even somebody like me can understand, which is
a feat in and of itself.
because I get vacuum mad when I don't understand something.
Hey, did you want to? Since we're talking about incursion and walking worlds, did you want to show those covers?
Oh yeah, we do have. What's the
Absolutely.
Manley overlay?
Yeah, the Manley overlay.
The
That's
Manley overlay.
It's not what you think.
It's not what it
Hold
sounds
on,
like.
don't tune out. Just keep watching. It'll be okay.
There, I have the Manley overlay now is up. This is the 2 covers. This is book 2 right here. Let's see if I can point it. Nope, right here.
There you go. That's book 2.
The
Good job.
series, and I'm reading it backwards, so it's the Walking Worlds
Walking Worlds. Yeah.
short story collection. And you had a last episode you were talking about making this kind of a reader magnet.
That was the plan, and what I was doing, and it still is it's sort of a speculative fiction grab bag, and
distracting.
it's got some space opera in it. It's got some superhuman thriller in it. It's got some superhero in it. It's got some epic fantasy in it. It's got some post-apocalyptic in it. It's just it's a big mashup of different genres. So hopefully people will find a story in there that they're interested in reading. And I was going to give that away as my reader magnet, but when I told some folks about it and said that it was going to clock in at around 50,000-60,000 words, they told me that was just way too long for a reader magnet, and I should probably put it out in the world and see if it gets any interest, and if it does, do something shorter as a reader magnet and just put my call to actions and stuff in the back of the book. So I'm like, and I thought that was kind of a cool cover considering the content of the book. So I decided I'm just going to go ahead and publish that and do something shorter for the reader magnet down the road. I have a real hard time working short. I'm long-winded, in case y'all haven't noticed.
No, I didn't notice that at all.
Long-winded.
Could have fooled me.
We've talked about writing short stories and stuff, and it's hard. And my thing is I like to read long fiction. And when before kind of say prior 2011, the advice for writers was write a bunch of short stories, get into some magazines, and then work your way up, and then all that stuff. And so I would try to write short stories every now and then out of this sense of guilt. But I rarely read them by that point, and so it's hard to write something. Now I read more short fiction with all the anthologies going around, and I've been in a couple, and it is kind of cool. Sometimes it's a relief to be able to bust out a project and finish it in 2 weeks rather than
right. Well, there's something to be said for small victories, and this is something I tell folks who ask me about finishing books, because I know a lot of people who say, "Oh, I started and I quit for whatever," and I'm like, there's something to be said for proving to yourself that you can get from Once Upon a Time to the end. And even if it's with something short, you can start with a short story that's only, say, 2,000 words, and then do a 5,000 word one, and then do a 15,000, and you can kind of build up that way if that's the method that works for you to get where you need to go. But there is a lot to be said for those small victories and small accomplishments leading to bigger ones.
I want to dig a little bit deeper into that in your process for writing the novels. But before we do that, I want to talk about the show sponsor. This week's episode of Live is brought to you by BZ Hercules Editing Services. Beth over at BZ Hercules has partnered with us here at Keystroke Medium to give our audience a 15% discount on all editing, proofing, triangulation services, and more. You can go to www.keystrokemedium.com/BZ Hercules, and that will redirect you to her site, and you can sign up there and send her a message, and she'll talk to you about all the services that she provides. You can do any one of them. You don't have to do a specific order. You can do the proofing, the beta reading. She does editing. Triangulation services is kind of an amalgamation of all those processes. Actually, Scott just got some done just here recently.
I sent off one last night and used my discount, and I was like, man, I love having a discount.
Boom. So if you're in the market, if you're in the need, check her out. We'd appreciate you giving her a chance. So when we talk about process, you talk about short stories and short victories, and then the long process, your novels. How long typically are your novels, and do you start out with an idea and kind of write from the beginning to the end, or how do you put those together?
Most of my novels are between 85 and I think the longest one's been 110,000 words. I try not to get too epic about it. I might change that if I go back to writing the epic fantasy stuff again. But that's usually kind of my goalpost is about 90,000 words. And the process starts, it always starts with one of these, little notebook.
Mm-hmm.
And I start making just general, this happens, that happens, this happens kind of notes for the storylines of each of the main protagonists. So for this next book, it's still going to be Brace and Latessa. And then after I get that bare bones model down, I'll sit down and I kind of approach it from a script writing point of view. I will start out with the opening sequence of the book, and then I'll go through the inciting incident, the lock-in, the midpoint, and I'll sort of iron those out, sort of expand from those basic notes. And then after that, it's just a matter of sitting down and writing towards those targets. Those become, I like to call my method tactical storytelling, because I set up targets for myself. And then as I sit down to write, I pretend I'm shooting and the words of the bullet streaming towards those targets. Mm-hmm. Once I hit one target, I've stuck that one, I move, I hit the next target. And I know that sounds,
rounds to help you give.
Yeah, exactly. And I know that sounds kind of, I don't know, guyish, but blokish. I think that's what the SPP guys would say. But that's what works for me. And you can call them targets, you can call them beats, you can call them plot points, you call them whatever you want. But the point is, you should always have something you're aiming for and writing towards with everything you write. And as you're writing that first draft, do not go backwards. It's always about forward momentum. It's always, even if you screw up, make a note about it, fix it in the second draft, but always keep going forward with what you're writing. If I could rip this damn backspace key off of my keyboard, I would. I would do it in a second. I want somebody with better computer ninja skills than I have to come up with some kind of app where I can just like activate it and deactivate it at will.
There is an app for the, I can't remember how it works, but there's a no backspace type.
There is.
I will have to find that, because
there's an app
that would be super useful.
I can't remember what it's called, but there's an app that basically you set a revolving timer, and I think it's, if you're not
write or die.
Yes, and if you're not typing for a certain amount of minutes, it deletes what you already typed.
Yeah, that's brutal.
Yeah. So if you stop and you're not writing for, say, I don't know, 5 minutes or whatever the time is, it'll go back and starts deleting.
The thing is, though, I think a lot of people, it isn't so much stopping. I think a lot of people start writing that first draft, and then they realize they misspelled a word a sentence and a half back, and they'll hit that backspace. This would sound better
if I did this. I need to
fix it, and then they'll write it again, and then see another thing and go back and fix that while they're doing the first draft. And I think that's what slows so many people down. I think once you get in that flow where you got the words going, you need to not worry about the mistakes and just ride that wave until the end. Mm-hmm. Because I think it's that internal editor interrupting the first draft that slows people down. I think that's why a lot of people can't seem to finish, because they'll write for a month and think, well, I should have 80,000 words by this point, or whatever, depending on how fast they write. And then they look back and see they've only got 30, and they get frustrated and quit. Whereas if they hadn't been constantly going backwards to try and correct things, they'd have that 80,000 words or whatever they think they should have at that point. So It's really about just turning off the internal editor and just full steaming ahead and charging the gates and kicking them down and pillaging the village.
I think that
I don't know where that came from, but
well, there should always be pillaging. I mean, backing,
we may or may not encourage village pillaging on Keystroke Media,
as long as you keep it clean and use it made up profanity.
That's right. Just do it politely. That's all.
What we're talking about here really is the difference between storytelling and story polishing.
Yes.
And in my opinion, and that I get into the polish sometimes because, I started out as a pantser, and I would write and just go with the story. But when you start getting stuck, it's easy to go back to the beginning and start making everything look great.
Exactly. And that's why that even just, I'm not a like nitpicky outliner. I don't think that my outline is not sacrosanct. You don't have to have every single detail in there. I think that actually kills a lot of the fun of it for me. I like a little discovery writing, but you need to have those targets and those plot points that you're trying to get to, and I think that's what gets you to the end of a manuscript. And then, like you said, you go back later and you polish it, I think I said last time that the Mythbusters proved you could polish a turd.
Well, I'm going to guess it. Well, we'll just stop. I almost got way too visual.
I almost did it. I was pulling you into that rabbit hole, and you just.
We have a puppy, so what I've noticed is that when you take the puppy out, you're supposed to pick up after it, right? And so I have kids of various ages and adults, and so a lot of times I notice when I take the dog out, I often don't just pick up one deposit, let's just say, and they are differing ages and and consistencies, and I think one might be easier to polish than the other. So I said I was going to go there, but I went in there. Just put that in your mental image file.
Hang on to that, folks. Hang on, courtesy of Keystroke Medium.
And just keep it over here, right here. You may or may not hear some of my dog babysitters in the next room. I hope not, but they're having fun, so. No, don't be alarmed if you hear them.
Kids having fun. It's not a bad sound.
Speaking of turds, you also do a little bit of podcasting yourself.
Wow, that's an awesome transition, Josh.
You're gonna have to dig.
That's amazing, man.
Nice.
And
you should go into marketing. That's fantastic.
God, I mean, you can't get any better than that on a segue. I don't even know.
Hey, Josh, can you segue my book next?
Yes. Oh, fantastic. Yes, I do a podcast now.
No, go.
Speaking of polished turds, so Story Shots is your
diamonds in the rough.
Yes. Story Shots is your podcast.
Yes.
And you do more of a on-topic kind of short to the point discussion, which is absolutely not what we do here. So do you want to talk a little bit about your podcast and what caused you to start it and what you're doing with it?
Yes, it's called the Story Shots Podcast. That's 2 words, Story Shots, available on iTunes and Stitcher.
Ding.
And basically, I'm sure most everybody's familiar with the Smarter Artist podcast that the SPP guys were doing a while back. It's just those 8 to 10 minute kind of answer a question, writing tips, publishing tips kind of thing. Well, they decided to do away with that. And I kind of felt like I always liked that because it was so short and bite-sized and you could get a lot of good information out of them a lot of times. Well, I decided to do the Story Shots. They're 10 to 15 minutes long. And basically they're about the storyteller's craft and the writer's lifestyle. And I cover, for instance, in one of the episodes, I took the rule of show, don't tell. And I actually drilled down on that and explained how you show, don't tell. Because in my past, I would talk to like writing instructors or older people that I was in a group with or whatever. And I would ask them specifically, hey, how do you like mechanically do that on the page? Mm-hmm. And I would get this flu, you have to feel the nuances of the words and blah, 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 horseshit. So I tried to actually give examples of if it sounds like this, that's not showing. If it sounds like this, that's showing, and really show you mechanically how to make it happen. I also touch on things about like where do you find ideas and different things like that. My most recent episode, the one coming out next week, is going to be a breakdown of genre, because a lot of people kind of get confused about where does my book fit. A lot of people don't even think about that. I didn't think about that when I wrote the Paragons trilogy. Since it was my first foray into KDP, I didn't realize I was going to have trouble putting it in the right spot. So I'm really kind of breaking down. I start with your basic 3 kinds of fiction: realistic fiction, science fiction, fantasy fiction. And then I drill down into each one of those and show examples of how those subgenres fall under those and so on and so forth.
Probably the single biggest tip you could give a brand new, never self-published or published before writer right now is understanding what type of story they're writing.
Exactly.
Because that's so frustrating to write what you feel is your most brilliant thing you've ever created, and you're like, but where do I put it?
Exactly. And I that was a big frustration for me with
Obviously,
the
you put
Paragon
it in the
trilogy.
superhuman category. Oh,
Yeah, superhuman thriller. Exactly. I thought I was just going to create a whole new genre for myself, and Amazon said,
Right.
no, you're not.
you could be number one in every subcategory of that genre.
There you go. But anyway, that's what it is. They're 10 to 15 minutes long. They come out every Friday. I'm up to episode. I think the most recent one that launched was episode 7. Again, iTunes and Stitcher. And they're really just I try to make them solid writing advice for people who are either new to the craft or just getting started. Because I think a lot of us have sort of moved more into worrying about the publishing end of the business as opposed to I'm just gonna go ahead and call it product production side of the business. And writing craft is the product production side of being an independent author. So I think it's just tips for stuff like that and how to kind of manage your time and things when you're trying to work from home, if you're doing it full time, or if you have a full-time job, where to find the time to get 100 words in here and there, and how to keep moving forward and not letting yourself get bogged down with other stuff.
If you're watching live, I posted the link to his website in the live chat, and it'll be in the show notes later if you're not watching live. That's his website.
Yeah, and I actually don't think I've put a page on the website yet for the Story Shots podcast, but again, you can search it up on iTunes and Stitcher.
Oh, the one that I found was storyshots.libsyn.
Oh, I thought you meant my actual like the cstevenmanley.net website.
No, this is just the Story Shots podcast. It's got all 7 episodes up, and
well, then you press on, sir, and ignore me.
Thank you very much.
Am I in the right place here where it says?
Probably not.
Well, it was something about tight pants and the plots they inspire, and I was
I try to give them fun titles.
Yeah,
that one was about pantsing and plotting.
I like that.
I like tight pants.
I try to be clever, and very rarely succeed.
We'll call it next time when I'm writing the ambush show intro for Josh to read and not understand what I just put in front of him.
That should have been your nickname, Chuck Tight Pants Manley.
Yeah. I'll put that.
Nobody wants to see that, man. Trust me. Nobody.
Tight Pants Plotting Manley.
Right. That's awesome.
It may or may not dovetail into your current story verse of science fiction. It might be a pen name.
If I ever decide to write that dinosaur erotica we were talking about a while back, maybe that'll be my pen name for that. Just Tight Pants.
Hey, it's good to get a Hugo.
God, that image makes me shudder. All right, go ahead. Let's press on.
Moving right along without any political sidewalling.
Well, what do you have coming up for you this year? I mean, you've got book 2 you've sent off, and it's almost out. You're writing book 3. What else do you have going on this year?
Well, the podcast will continue. I've got episodes in the can waiting to be published. And really, I've got so many ideas for books. I've got an epic fantasy idea about basically a group of guys who are sort of Indiana Joneses in a fantasy setting kind of thing. I've got ideas for straight up thrillers with no speculative elements to them. I got more ideas than I think I'll have lifetime to write them.
That's a good problem to have.
Yeah, I'm also think a lot about I think I want to work towards being a multi-genre author. I how like Stephen King, and I know that's a very high bar, but like Stephen King, he writes the horror, fantastic stuff, but he also writes some decent thrillers. Dean Koontz, same way. He writes suspenseful stuff, but with different. It can have fantastic elements or not. And that's kind of what I want to be known as. I guess, I want C Steven Manley fans and not necessarily just fans of a certain character or certain book. So right. I want to try and give myself the freedom to explore these different genres. Aside from that, the next big thing I want to try and get into is audiobooks. That's a nut. That is a nut I have yet to crack.
Audiobooks are fabulous. That's just all I have to say about
yeah I love listening to audiobooks, and I would love to have the Paragons trilogy up as an audiobook, but I've listened I think to every damn narrator on ACX, and I don't know if it's just I don't have that particular kind of talent to pick out a voice or what, but it's proving to be difficult.
That's one of the things about Amazon is you can't just say you read my book and it's going to be great. You have to really know your narrators. You have to really know your story and then pair that up, because some narrators are great doing anything, but some narrators are not good doing.
Yes.
Yeah, you can have a fantasy narrator that's great for doing fantasy, but he cannot do action science fiction. There's a big kind of disconnect there with some narrators.
There's a lot of good talent out there, I think, because there's a lot of people that are trying to break into the narrating business just like writers, but you got to find them, and they have to have one. They can't just be good at doing voices and entertaining their buddies, because they can do all kinds of cool voices. They also got to be able to tell a story. They got to be an actual actor, a voice actor, and they have to have one, the know-how on the technology and the equipment. And then they have to, like, my first narrator could only do his narration at like 2 a.m. in the basement during a certain time of the year when the heater wasn't running and the kids weren't up and a train that was by his house didn't go by. So he had some definite time challenges on getting that stuff out, because, and you tell these stories about, he'd be like reading and then he'd have to hit pause. He'd sit there and wait for the train to go by. And then come right back in, and those little things like
issues
that.
right there.
Choo-choo.
Yeah, and another thing is, like, okay, so in the Paragons trilogy, the male lead is an African American, and it's like, okay, I tried to find a good African American type voice to do the reading for that, but then the female is a young Caucasian woman, so it's like finding somebody that can really do both of those believably is super challenging. And I don't know, since I've got a male protagonist and a female protagonist, maybe it should be a woman reading it. It's just, I kind of set myself up for a lot of difficulty with the character choices as far as a voice performance goes. So.
It's very interesting, because I know some people who like kind of the radio theater where you have like 15 different people reading. And I do not like that.
I don't like that. And I don't like sound effects.
Yeah,
I don't like the Star Wars audiobooks always have the background noise of like the ship sounds and stuff. I hate that. Just give me one person giving a good reading performance, and I'm happy.
When they do voices, they don't always have to be over the top.
No,
it's more about the cadence and the timing and stuff. And then also some talent for making unique voices.
And consistency, through a whole 100,000 word book, keeping each voice consistent to that character. That amazes me when they pull the stuff like that off.
And going back to choosing the right narrator, you wouldn't want Luke Daniels reading Game of Thrones. You know what I mean? Like, he does great for like the Ember War and Marco Cluse's books and like military science fiction.
Doesn't he read the Iron Druid stuff by Kevin Hearn? Iron Druid.
Oh, you know what? I think he does, but I've never heard that.
He reads a lot of
stuff. Is good.
But you can't really beat Roy Dotrice for reading Game of Thrones.
Yeah. I love Roy Dotrice, even though all of his kid characters sound like old people. But I still love it, and I've listened to that entire. Well, the 5 books, what's that, like 150 hours of listening?
Yeah.
I've listened to it 3 times. So I put some hours into listening to Roy Dotrice.
What are you listening to now, Chuck?
Right now I'm listening to the latest Joe Ledger novel by Jonathan Marbury. I forget the name of the guy that reads those. I can't even think. It's called Dogs of War. If you haven't listened, Joe Ledger is he's a secret agent type guy who was a Green Beret and a cop for a while, and he works for a thing called the Department of Military Sciences, and they're basically the branch of the government that goes after mad scientists. And it's very
like they're the people who go after Josh Hayes and his 10 fingers. Sorry,
10 fingers. The first book is called Patient Zero, and it introduces Joe and the whole setting, and it's basically they're trying to track down this guy who created a virus that makes zombies.
Oh, nice.
And the science is actually pretty strong to it too. I mean, Marbury doesn't get too crazy with his hand waving. He actually takes real world science and extrapolates just enough to make it believable. It's called Patient Zero. Awesome book. I recommend everybody read it.
Dogs of War?
Well, the first book is Patient Zero. Dogs of War.
What was the author's name again? I'm sorry. I'm trying to write this down.
Jonathan Marbury. Maberry. He is a great writer. A lot of good stuff.
If you're watching live, I just linked it in the live chat.
Yeah.
See, I'm like scribbling on a cheap notebook, and Josh is like freaking direct linking
Scott,
technology.
right here, man.
That's
Give me,
Yeah,
give me a
because
pen and a notebook.
these 10 fingers are magic. Just so you know.
a magic 10 fingers. That was our prove you have 10 fingers segment of the show, which we're
And
going to have from now
at
on.
the end of the month, these 9 fingers are magic. So,
Exactly.
well, we are coming to the end of the hour, which means we're going to have to wrap it up, unfortunately, because this has been a fantastic show.
I wanted to go because we only got to the notebook, and we didn't get to like what you do after the notebook. So next show, we're going past the notebook in Chuck's writing thing. So, sorry.
Okay. Well, after the notebook is Evernote, and then it's Scrivener.
Okay.
And from Scrivener, I write the draft, I correct the draft, I compile the draft, I publish the draft. All that comes from Scrivener. I do want to get a Mac so I can try Vellum.
Macs are amazing.
So I keep hearing.
So do you not export to Word at all? You keep it all in Scrivener?
I will export to Word for the paperbacks. So far there's paperback versions of all my books. And I will export to Word because the auto corrections, like the grammar checker and stuff like that in Word, is a lot more vigorous than the one in Scrivener. Fortunately, I tend to produce pretty clean drafts just because I've been doing this, most of my life. But I find that Word will catch a lot of stuff that Scrivener won't. And this is before it goes to my beta readers, and they'll catch even more. But really, Word I use specifically for that and for my for formatting and stuff for the paperbacks.
Very cool.
Cool. All right.
Okay. Well, everybody go ahead, Scott.
I interrupted you, and that was my interruption. So I think we're going to talk about where we can find Chuck's stuff.
Yes. Will you please tell our audience where they can find it about
you?
And your
as I said, the podcast is on iTunes and Stitcher. You can just search it. If you want to not use either one of those routes, it's hosted through Libsyn, Libsyn. You can find it there as well. If you want to check out me, go to www.cstevenmanley.net. That is Steven with a V. A lot of people want to put the PH in there. And then I'm on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. If you look me up on Facebook, your best bet is probably to go to my closed group that I started. It's called Darkwalker's Den, the Worlds of C Steven Manley. And that's just basically, I started a closed group where I could, because Facebook makes you tie everything to your page. I've got a potpourri of writing stuff and family stuff on my official page or my official profile. And then my C Steven Manley page, they've reached a point with those where they're pretty much useless unless you want to spend money on every single post you do. So I opened the closed group. I started the closed group so that people who are just interested in the writing and what I have to say about writing and all that stuff can join that. And like right now, there's a link to get a beta version of the second Brace Cordova book in there. So people can join and get that. And I have some other freebies that I give away. And I think I'm going to start doing like Facebook Live things in there for people who are interested or have questions for me and stuff like that. So on Facebook, Darkwalker's Den, and then Instagram and Twitter, C Steven Manley. And if you can't find me after all that, you're not looking very hard.
Learn to interweb.
We can find you with the interweb. We can use the magic.
I'm not giving you my phone number.
You can always do the funnel in through. You can always come via Keystroke Media, and we'll take you there.
There you go. That sounds great. Thank you, guys. I appreciate that.
Guided tour.
Everybody that hang out with us in the live chat, thanks for hanging out with us. Always a good time to have you causing mayhem and ruckus in the chat box. Always a good time. If you're listening to us on the feed, come listen to us live. Always the same time, same bat channel, same bat time, same bat hosts.
Same bat 10 fingers.
That's right.
I was going for a long time.
That's right. So for the Dragon, I am Josh 10-Finger Hayes. We've been live with Chuck the Man, Chuck Manley. Be sure you come back next week and hang out with us. Coming up on Thursday, we have Better Space Battles with MD Cooper or Michael Cooper. And then next Monday, we'll be live with Neil Asher. So make sure you come and hang out with us for that. it's going to be a great time. We've got some good guests coming up. We've got Ian Garner coming up in 2 weeks, Jack Campbell, and 2 Mondays from now, Jasper T. Scott coming up as well. Got a good lineup of guests. And also, if you'd like to suggest some guests, head over to Facebook and let us know who you'd like to get on the show if we haven't had them all already, or if we had to have them back on again. That'll do it for this episode. Guys, come back next time. We're going to talk about some reading. We're going to talk about some writing. And, of course, everything in between right here on Keystroke Medium. You guys have a great Monday.
Bye, guys. Thanks.
Later.